All right. Hi, everybody. I see that there's a lot of people have joined over the last few minutes. We're going to get started in just a moment. What I'd love to hear as we kind of wait a few minutes to kick off is if you could let me know where you're joining in from. I'm presenting here today from Brooklyn in New York. And awesome. I see, Femi, you're joining us from Paris. Yeah, just drop in where you're coming. Billy, welcome from NYC. So we must be relatively close to each other. Awesome. Hugh coming in from Rochester. Heather, how's it going? Good to see you here. I hope London is treating you well. Aaron, welcome from the Bay Area. Marcio, how's it going, my friend? Oi, tudo bem? Tudo bem, brasileiro? And it's nice to see a few faces or at least names that I know here. Hi, Kara and Rob. Julio from Munich, thanks for joining. Good to see you here. Cool. So, more people will be joining over the next few minutes, but I'm going to get going just because we have a lot of content to go through. I'm going to first flip through some slides, and then I'm going to invite our guest to join for the conversation, which will be the bulk of our time together. So let me flip back here and let's get going. So, first off, today is the second event in our Experts in Launch Studio series, and we're really excited to be continuing this series. And the focus of this series is really to bring together experts from the crowdfunding space that have worked with a lot of creators, helping them launch products to really investigate different parts of the launch journey. And, I think a lot of you know me already, but for those of you who don't, my name is Julio Terra, and I am the co-founder of Launch Studio. I've been working in the crowdfunding space for a long time. Before Launch Studio, I actually worked at Kickstarter for many years. I helped to start and build a team at Kickstarter that was responsible for engaging with creators from the design and technology community, finding people all over the world who are working on cool stuff and helping them launch successfully on the platform. And, I hope you're here today for our pre-launch marketing event, because if you are in the right place. Our focus for the next 90 minutes is going to be on, first, I'm going to make the case for why pre-launch marketing is such an essential activity for independent entrepreneurs and designers who are launching products on Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Then I'm going to host a conversation with our guest where we'll explore what it takes to successfully tap into the power of pre-launch marketing to successfully get your product funded on crowdfunding platforms. So my hope is that in a little over an hour from now, you're going to have a really solid understanding of why pre-marketing matters, and also you'll have a better understanding of how to effectively bring this to practice in your own journey. So, our guest, which she'll be coming on later, is Lisa Gantar from Nook Digital. And we're really thrilled to have Lina join us today. So Lina has helped thousands of startups in her career, thousands of startups to launch products, and both in her career as the founder and leader at Nook, but also beforehand when she was working at Google. And Nook, the agency that she runs, they have helped hundreds of Kickstarter creators successfully launch products on Kickstarter. Their services spans from pre-marketing all the way to post-campaign, and they really do have a deep expertise in the area of pre-launch, marketing and community building, which is why I was so excited when she agreed to join us here today. Their team also has a deep expertise in the area of post-funding e-commerce, but that's something beyond our scope for today. The Nook team has also won, a bunch of awards, and they are official Facebook and Google marketing partners. So again, they have really deep expertise in this area. So I'm gonna carry on, and you'll get to meet Lina a little bit later. So what I wanna do now is just quickly, I always do this in all of our events, is drop a little poll to ask you, why are you joining us today? So here we go. I'm just gonna launch that. Let's take a minute, everyone, if you wouldn't mind just responding there. And I want to know, why are you here? So I see a few responses. I think there's, a few people who are very early in their product launch journey. I think only one of them. Most of you are actively preparing to launch a product, and that's great. I think that's really what this event can help most is people in that area who are, planning to launch a campaign in the not too distant future. Okay, I'm gonna actually wrap up the poll here. I know there's more people who haven't answered, but just so we can keep going, just sharing the results quickly. As you can see, the vast majority of people who are here today are actively working on a product that they're going to launch soon. So that's awesome. So here's what we're going to do together. I'm going to take you through why pre-launch marketing matters. Then we're going to have a conversation with Lina about pre-launch and, just kind of talk about a bunch of really little nitty-gritty details, talk about strategies, tactics, all these different things. That's going to last for about 15 minutes. And then we are going to leave about 20 minutes for audience Q&A at the end. And the way that you can get the most value from the event today is first, as much as possible, reduce distractions. Also be an active participant. As you saw, I'm going to ask you sometimes to share something in the comments or take a poll. Your contribution really matters. It matters because we want to hear from you. It matters also because that helps other people learn from your perspective. And finally, stay till the end. At the end is when you're going to get a question to not a question. You're going to have the opportunity to get your questions answered. So if you have questions, it's really important for you to stay till the end. And the best way to get your questions answered is to early on in the event, as we go through, if you have a question, drop it in to the Q&A panel. And you can access the Q&A panel if you go to the bottom of the Zoom dashboard. If where there's all those little buttons at the bottom of that Zoom window, there's one that is Q&A. And the reason why it's important for you to go and add your questions in there early is because we're asking people to upvote questions. We're not going to be able to get through all the questions. So the best way to have the best chance that your question will be prioritized is add it in there early so that other people can upvote it as well. And at the end, we're literally going to go through the questions starting from the most upvoted and make our way down as far as we can on that list. All right, awesome. So let's shift gears now and talk about why pre-launch marketing matters. And before I even get into that, I want to chat a little bit about what is pre-launch marketing. I think pre-launch marketing is essentially a set of activities that aims to generate awareness, but also interest and desire for your product before it launches, whether it launches on a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter or whether it launches elsewhere. So this is a term that's used more widely than just, of course, in the Kickstarter world. But we'll get into actually in the conversation with Lina why pre-launch marketing is so crucial in the pre-launch in the Kickstarter crowdfunding world, more so than if you're launching a product on your own website. And this, pre-launch marketing activities, they're really intended to build anticipation for your product's launch, especially in the world of Kickstarter, because what you want to do is get the most impact for your product during this very short window during which your campaign is going to be live. And that's why pre-launch marketing is really so crucial. You have a small window where your project is going to be live and it's going to be funding, and you want to really do your best to be able to extract the most value from that funding window. So there's essentially 3 core activities that happen. I mean, of course, you can break these down into much more granular levels, but the 3 kind of core things you're going to be doing as part of your pre-launch marketing efforts is finding your audience, making a connection with your audience, and then nurturing and qualifying your audience. And if you do all these things right, that's what's really going to help you have, a powerful launch, and it's going to help you get funded. If you do these things really well, you're going to get funded on day one, and you're going to exceed your goal many times over. But even, for any campaign nowadays, like this work is really critical. So one of the things that I know sometimes I get questions from members of our community and creators in general is that, we often talk about community building, and here we're talking about pre-launch marketing, and these 2 things are very related. And I just wanted to address that. So community building is essentially part of pre-launch marketing. Pre-launch marketing involves more than community building. And when I talk about community building here, I'm talking about the work involved in terms of that exists through the list that you built of people who are interested in your product. It exists through the interactions you have with them, through Facebook groups, through live events, and through other means. And so I think it's really important to realize, sometimes people even use these terms interchangeably, but so I just wanted to put that out there, that these things are very similar, but community building is a part of pre-launch marketing. Pre-launch marketing encompasses more than just the community building things that we talked about. So now let's talk about what are the benefits of pre-launch marketing. So the first thing, and one of the most important benefits, is it really enables you to create momentum on launch day. And the reason why momentum on launch day is so important is because, like having a lot of backers in your launch day provides a really strong social proof that not only helps you convert more people who come to your project page, but also helps elevate your project on Kickstarter, because the Kickstarter algorithm will pick up that excitement, will pick up those activities, and will actually elevate your project in any search results and in the way that they feature projects around the site. And that's why it's not uncommon that people will say that your first backers are much more valuable than your later backers. And this is something that pre-launch marketing can really help you with. So the way that it does that is it actually extends the time frame for you to find your audience. I think most creators feel like they have a really good sense of who their audience is and how to find them, but you actually don't know if you do until you start trying to actually find them, and you try to actually run ads and target them and getting them to your page. And so being able to extend that time frame that you have, so you don't just have a month to find your audience, you can extend that by several other months or even years. That can be hugely beneficial to your ability to get that traction on day one. The other thing that it does is it also provides you this time frame that you can nurture and qualify the interest of these people that you found, this audience that you've identified, and in your product. Because some people are just interested in your product because they think it's cool, but they have no interest in buying it. Other people are actually have a really strong interest in your product and really want to engage with you and really want to potentially purchase your product. They really have a purchase intent, and you want to, as much as possible, be able to assess that before you launch. That's, again, one of those other things about, this ultimately becomes another element of connecting with your audience. The other thing that it really helps you is it helps you build a compelling project page, because you can learn a lot about your audience by engaging with them in the time that leads up to your campaign through, marketing campaigns, through surveys, and through other means, and just even through the ways that they interact with your communications before you launch. The other thing that it does is it's an amazing way that you can continue to drive engagement throughout your campaign, because then, you essentially identify this group of people that they might not convert right away, but you still have this group of people that you've identified that you can continue to communicate with throughout the length of your campaign, and hopefully get more of them to offer support. And then the final thing is that, building this type of community through an email list, through Facebook groups, and so forth, that's just a really powerful way for you to establish a long-term foundation for the growth of your brand. You're essentially establishing these deeper relationships. It's not just about a transaction. Like many of you are launching your first product through Kickstarter, and what you want to do is not just get a product in the hands of people. You're trying to build a foundation for a business that you're establishing. All right, cool. So I've breezed through my slide. The last question that I have two questions for you around how well do you know Kickstarter. So the first thing, I'm going to ask you all to reply in the comments again. How many Kickstarter projects or Indiegogo projects have you ever backed? So let me know. I will admit I have backed, I was looking yesterday, 2,510 projects. Creighton, awesome, you're here. That's great. Yeah, Creighton, not only have you backed hundreds, but you were the first creator to ever launch a design product on Kickstarter. So awesome to have you here. Okay, who else? Come on, give us a Alex. Great, you backed 3. You got to back some more. I know you're working on a big launch soon. So let's just hear from a few more. Melissa, none. Okay, awesome. You should definitely back some. Rob, I see you back 20. Woody, you've backed dozens. That's great. Joseph, you've backed about 10. Robert, you backed none. You should get to work. Back some if you're planning to launch one at any point in the future. Marco, you backed 3 too. Okay, awesome. So it seems like the vast majority of you have backed a handful of projects, and that's really great. But you should back more. If you're planning to launch a product on Kickstarter, you don't have to back for the product itself, but even just backing for a few dollars and following along. It's the learnings that you can get from engaging with a live project is really, really crucial for you to understand what it takes to run a live campaign. The other question I have for you, how many of you have ever signed up for an email list for a product that has yet to launch? How many of you, which is a core pre-launch marketing activity, has anyone here ever done that? If you have, raise your hands, please. I, of course, have, but I am an addict for this kind of things, as I think has been obviously apparent. it seems like Tamara, awesome. You've done that, great. Creighton, you have, but not off Kickstarter. Not off of Kickstarter. Okay, great. Anyone else want to share? Okay, cool. It seems like yeah, like people have them for a couple, and that's great. You know, I would say right now, if you're, you know, considering launching a Kickstarter campaign soon, you should actively seek out projects out there who have landing pages coming soon to sign up. You know, like you want to see how those people are communicating with them. Also, you just want to, you know, look for landing pages that so that you can learn from what other people have done. Yes, I mean, I get that you're creators, but not backers. But you know, to be able to be a great creator, you know, not just somebody who makes great products, but who actually is able to connect and market them well, you have to tap into that other side of your being too. So cool. Well, now I am going to move us on, and I'm going to bring Lina here into our session, and I'm going to promote her to a panelist so that we can get started with our conversation. Awesome. Lina, welcome, welcome. I think you're muted. I think it just automatically mutes you at first. So
yeah,
there we go.
Hi, how are you?
Very good. It's great to have you here. Can everybody, I can hear you. Can everybody hear us okay? Before we dive in to make sure, awesome, everybody is hearing us loud and clear. So it's great to have you here. Did you want to say anything about Nook or about your background beyond what I said before we kind of dive into the conversation?
No, I think you've summed it up pretty well. Thank you so much actually for that kind intro. But no, I'm really happy to get started and just talk through everything. It's probably my favorite thing to do.
That's great. Yeah, no, you know, through all of our conversations, I always appreciate that you're very eloquent with, not only are you very knowledgeable, but I think you're able to explain things very well. And so let's start with, you know, something that we had when we were chatting the other day, like, let's start with the most common mistakes that creators make when they're doing pre-launch marketing. I know this is a big category, but I think this is one that's super crucial and something that I know everybody is very interested in. So what would you say are the handful of biggest mistakes that you see creators do when they're doing pre-launch marketing?
Yeah, I mean, definitely that's a good one. And I think it's something that we could probably discuss for the next hour. But I do feel that definitely to start with, one of the most common mistakes from the beginning is not planning well in advance and not researching things well. I think a lot of people underestimate you know, the power of pre-launch marketing. And you know, it's kind of like also what we've seen with the polls. If you've not been part of a pre-launch as a backer, for example, you don't really see how important it is that you get the information, that you feel comfortable with something that's launching. And if you're a creator and think, oh, you know, it's going to be just more straightforward if I just like have some ad budgets and push them in the live campaign, for example. I think that's problematic because you don't know where to put them. Like you've kind of done a really good intro with your slides, Julio, and they just don't prepare well. And I think the list is a lot of times underestimated. And then secondly, for people who don't underestimate the preparation and building a community, I think a lot of them, they just think that it's about the list. And I think, again, that's, you really introed it quite well, about building the community is just part of it, but it is very important because we get people who collected like 10,000, 15,000 subscribers, which is quite a lot actually, but they didn't do anything with them. So they kind of pushed people to subscribe, and they did that well. But then the campaign went live and nobody's buying. And then you don't know why they're not buying because you've never had a conversation with them. You've not tried to like reach out and hear what they have to say, hear their feedback, like why they want to buy it. You don't understand whether they're actually happy with the price. Maybe people subscribe not knowing what this is going to cost, not knowing what Kickstarter is. So I think that's a common mistake as well, because, you know, getting to a point where you can generate a subscriber list is fairly straightforward. And I think that's what would separate Kickstarter from something else, is that, you know, you do have to educate these people and you do have to like let them know, okay, what's going to happen on day one? Why is it important that they're there on day one? You know, asking them, are they happy with the price, so that you can change your sort of offering before you go live and have it more synced with what the community actually expects. So I think that's probably the second one. So for people who are the opposite of, I'm not going to have any list, the opposite is I'm going to have a huge list, but I don't have time to talk to all these people. So I'm just going to get the list and then send them an email when it's live and hope for the best. And then once it's live, you can't really go back, and change the strategy and talk to people again. Very difficult. And I think third one is actually, you wouldn't expect it, but it's being genuine. I think that's quite a common pitfall as well, because people think, okay, I'm going to send a few emails, I'm going to tell them a bit what's going on, but they don't want to put their face in front of this community. And I guess that's why it's a good word community, because people expect to know who it is about. And actually, in the end, they back because they kind of buy into the whole thing, not just the product, but the whole experience. And I feel a lot of people are shy. They feel like they have a bad accent in English. So they kind of don't want to be part of it. They don't want to be signed in the emails. They don't want to do a Facebook Live or a webinar before launch to kind of connect on a personal level. And then they also don't want to be included on the Kickstarter page or Kickstarter video. So then it's just kind of oh, here's the product, So I think a lot of people underestimate that. It's not that that's what we do, but it's a lot, because we always try to push and, help them build the community. But of course, we're not the creator. We can't do the connecting instead of the creators. And I think that is probably the biggest differentiator of campaigns that do really well on launch day. It's because people feel connected to the whole project rather than just subscribe to a list. And
that's interesting, because I do think that's one of those areas where crowdfunding really differs from e-commerce. I think people think of it's not an Amazon, so that human connection, and on Amazon, if you were to talk about community building, I mean, that would just sound absurd. It is I think that's the other angle of community, is you're not only trying to actually engage people when you have them on this list, but you're actually also trying to establish a real connection. And without some humanity in there, it's really hard to establish I mean, you might even get some people that just want that product, but it's not the same type of connection where they might be willing to pledge for it months before they get it. They might be like, "Oh, I really want that product. I'm going to get it in the store once it goes into the store." But what are all the things that you can do around building trust, around building that engagement to, and one question that I have for you, just because you lightly touched on this, and I don't want us to dive really deep in this, but I'd love to get a little bit, how does launching a product on Kickstarter differ from launching a product on your own e-commerce site? Just only because we're talking about how important community is, especially when you're launching something on Kickstarter, and how important the first day is. I know we're going to get what are some of the high level differences that you see between those two approaches?
I think it's definitely a good question. To be honest, sometimes there's products and, campaigns that are actually more relevant to be launched on e-commerce because they're maybe nothing new, or they're just something that has an extra feature or is cheaper or something. So, not a lot of times, but sometimes we would actually tell somebody who reaches out and would say, this doesn't really seem Kickstarter relevant. Why don't you just go and launch it on your own? It really doesn't seem like there's anything new to it. It's going to be hard to get people excited. But I think the biggest difference is that when you launch on Kickstarter, it is really important that, of course, you get this traction on day one. Whereas, of course, when you launch on e-commerce, nobody sees what's going on and nobody knows what you need to raise in those kind of terms. So, of course, you can do things more gradually, and you can kind of be okay, I'll do a little bit now, see how it does. You optimize, you change strategy, you adjust on a daily basis, and you have sort of an ongoing duration of that. And you don't necessarily need a big investment of time and resources into this pre-launch stage, because you can kind of do things as you go along with e-commerce. Whereas on Kickstarter, because getting to that certain goal that you need in those 30 days is a difficult challenge, and it's not the most straightforward thing. You have to put resources into pre-launch, because you need people to be there on day one. Otherwise, things are just going to sort of be very watered down. It's kind of we say a lot of times it's kind of launching a club, in the city center, but have no queue and have no promo. and have nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody's gonna then join in and figure out that it's there, you know. But of course, yeah, you could do little marketing every day and night, but it's important that there's people there on day one. I think that's Kickstarter. Like, it's important that there's people there on day one, if not for anything else, just for like the algorithms of a platform. You know, it is like Amazon, and it seems like people who launch products on Amazon, they understand, oh, you need to be good in ranking and you need to have like good keywords, and you know, you need to have traction for the platform to kind of recommend you. But it's very similar in Kickstarter. It's still a platform. So if you don't push your own traffic, the platform is not just going to magically, you know, generate revenue. And I think that kind of goes with one of the common mistakes category as well, is that people think, oh, I'm going to launch and then Kickstarter will just bring money. And I think people forget that, you know, on average, Kickstarter kind of brings, yes, 30%, which is great, you know, 30% of the total funding, that's great. But people come and say, oh, I want to raise $1 million. And then they expect that that's 900,000 from Kickstarter, you know? So if you want to raise $1 million, 300,000, if you do your own stuff well and properly, is going to come from Kickstarter, very likely, because you'll be popular. But you still need to bring the 700,000 from somewhere else, you know, and that's the challenge, and people forget that. Whereas on e-commerce, yes, you don't get those 30%, but then you also don't need to have this massive day one in order to drive this traction and popularity on. So I think that's the biggest difference there, is like, you need something that excites people and that wants people to join in. Whereas, you know, on e-commerce, everything's kind of hidden. You can do lots of things slowly in the background.
Yeah. And so let's talk now about, you know, maximizing the impact of your efforts a little bit. You know, I think the first, even like, how do you know, like, if pre-launch efforts can work for you? Like, how does your team, when you're working with someone and they're like, hey, we want to do this, we want to do pre-launch, how do you talk to a client about like assessing, like, is your product a good fit for pre-launch?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think maybe before, I mean, dive in, I know we have lots of things to discuss, but I feel that it's one thing that pre-launch should be there regardless, right? It's just what kind of pre-launch. So of course, let's call it the easier pre-launch from that perspective is, you know, to go through social media and get people excited and get them to subscribe and all of that, like we've kind of touched a little bit. And that is not necessarily feasible for every project, just because that costs money. So of course, if you have something that's a very affordable product, like something that costs $20 and people are going to on average buy not more than $20, $30, it is really, really difficult to make that financially feasible in pre-launch, because in order to generate a subscriber, if you do things really, really well, you know, your best case scenario is, you know, spending $1 to generate a subscriber, right? And generally a benchmark there is that between, you know, 3 and 5%, if you do well on the community building side, will convert. So by default, even if you're in the best case world, you know, you have $1 cost per subscriber and you have 5% conversion rate, that's still $20 to get somebody to buy on Kickstarter, right? From the pre-launch effort. So that doesn't make sense. If then they're buying for $20, then you're not, you know, you're not even breaking even if you consider cost of goods and stuff like that. So I think that's something that people need to take into consideration. Of course, then there's other options, a more guerrilla type of approach, right? More like, you know, do the groundwork yourself, set up a pop-up shop in a busy square, like go to a conference and get people to engage and subscribe there. Like, you can do a lot as well on that type of products, but a typical sort of pre-launch, like you would read about and like what we do in terms of driving subscribers through landing pages and social media, it's not for everybody. So it's really important to kind of have those benchmarks down and calculate financial feasibility and say, okay, like, best case scenario already doesn't work for me. And, you know, best case scenario happens, you know, 5-10% of the time. So having like best and worst case scenario calculations done to understand, okay, like, this doesn't work for me, it's also good so that you can maybe try something a bit more alternative, I guess. But in mainstream, I think we sometimes tell clients, look, like, unless you come up with a crazy bundle offer so that people will order average order value of $100, for example, you won't break even. And then of course there's some people that don't need to break even. But
of
for most
course.
people, then of course they would look for other ways to generate traction and conversation.
And I think that's actually, I mean, that point of like, it's really something I see a lot of creators just looking at other projects and assuming a lot. Like you just never know what the reality is of another project in terms of like, did they have capital where they didn't need to break even or whatnot? So it's hard. Sometimes you see projects that have raised $1 million, but actually didn't do it profitably. So it looks great, but it's you're trying to work, oh, how can I get there? And it's really hard.
Yeah, and there's different margins in different industry as well, isn't it? So for example, like we see a lot of board game creators. I mean, board game creators, just because there's this input of work for the design, but then it's really a printed product, if you will, in a lot of cases for board games, they can afford to spend more because their margins are much, much, much higher. Whereas in hardware, for example, technology, if margins are already tight and then you give, early bird discounts, it's very, very challenging to make a profit. And I think that's probably, we can just keep adding to those pitfalls. Another big challenge is that people think they're going to make money on Kickstarter. They forget that technically this is to get things going. I don't know because I didn't, start Kickstarter, but maybe, you were there sort of closer to the beginnings. I don't imagine this was meant for people to make money. This was meant for people to make things happen, but not to make profits. And I think a lot of times you get people who are like into their numbers and they're not willing to like listen that people want a lower price point, because a lower price point is not going to get them profit. And we hear that a lot. It's like, oh, but I'm not going to make any money on this. It's like, but this is to start, and then of course, long run, you're hopefully making money from your business. But Kickstarter generally, at least from how I see it, it's not to make profits and huge profits. And like you said, most multi-million-dollar campaigns that I've worked on, there's not been profits. There's been a really great sort of launch pad for them to move forward, potentially get noticed by retailers and investors and stuff like that. And then that's the start of their journey, not,
I think that's the same, that it's not anything against profits, but it's just like this is a moment where like you have all these costs of setting up manufacturing and all of those. Like if you do things really well, maybe you can offset most of those costs, but that's I love, we chatted a little bit now about like small project, like where kind of the rubber meets the road there in terms of your product has a very small average order value, how it can be tough. Let's flip the script in terms of like, let's talk about how does like the scale of a project with a very high cost of a product, how does that change how you think about the pre-launch campaign? So, I think you have that kind of in the middle spot, which is like the $100-$200 product. And then you have products that cost like $1,000 or something like that. Like, how do you think differently for products at those two different scales of average order value?
Yeah, I definitely see that it's much easier for them. I think it's a shame because of course, easier for them in terms of marketing, just because even though their margins percentage wise might be smaller, but what's actually left over is a bigger chunk to kind of spend on testing and spend on marketing and spend on creative and all of that. So I think they're have just a better sort of predisposition just because of it, because they can definitely afford to do more with it, and it's going to cost them less, just because what we normally see to get a backer from pre-launch efforts, on average, the range of cost per backer from pre-launch, if we call that like a key performance indicator, a cost of backer from pre-launch is going to range, like we said, somewhere between $20 and $60 that you're going to spend to acquire a backer on day one from pre-launch efforts. So if you're then selling this backer, $1,000 stand-up paddleboard, that's great because you've spent 60 and you got somebody buying something for 1,000. Whereas if you're selling them, I don't know, a mask, and that costs $20, then you've lost. You've not even covered your cost, you've actually lost money on pre-launch. So I think, yeah, definitely, higher price points, of course, have that sort of advantage. But of course, they're usually more difficult to make after Kickstarter. So I would imagine a lot of the more expensive products in the end are less likely to actually execute things well and get it shipped.
Cool. And so the like other question I wanted to ask,
was that what you were sort of going?
It does. I think later I want to touch on a little bit more of like, how do you do you guys take different creative approaches? Do you guys think differently about how you have the landing page? But we can talk about that when we're going to later talk about landing pages and stuff. So I think like that's just an area that I'll kind of, I think, poke at as we go through the conversation. For now, I think that was great, because I think that's what I'd love to ask you now is like, how early should people start this work? And I think I know that like when you think about community building, when you're doing it organically, that's something that you do sometimes months and months, sometimes years ahead. But I'm thinking more about like the kind of work that Nook does, where you come in and you're kind of like taking the power of digital ads, and then also along with all these engagement strategies, and you're bringing that together in the lead up to a launch. Like, what's the right time to engage in that type of activity before a launch?
Yeah, I would say that really depends on, the goals. I think that's probably always the first question we ask anybody before we even like ever have an intro call, is like what their objectives are. Because of course, if people have high ambitions, of course that will take longer. So to, generate, like we discussed, $1 million campaign, and you have to bring 700,000 of that from your own efforts, kind of in most cases. That's a big chunk, that's a big project. So, it's much better to start doing actual efforts like landing pages, testing, surveys, all of that, warming up people, getting them ready, about 2 months. I will say that more than 2 months in terms of scale is probably a bit early, just because people then sort of get tired of it, or you get on their nerves because there's been too much comms, or they find something that replaces this. Because a lot of times with Kickstarter projects being quite innovative, I think it's something like people discover it and they're like, wow, I've never thought of this, but I need it. But then if they wait for too long, they're finding replacements or substitutes or something that sort of, because they've discovered it in this pre-launch effort, they then don't wait to get it on Kickstarter, but they find something that sort of replaces it to some extent while they're waiting, because they didn't kind of know they had the need until they saw like a pre-launch advert, for example. But yeah, I would say like a sweet spot for any kind of campaign, it would be like between 1 and 2 months. 1 month for smaller campaigns, is doable. 2 months, bigger campaigns, probably like 3 months being max, just in terms of not to get stale, and sort of being a bit comfortable in terms of assets.
And so how do you, I mean, so you're saying like that's actually doing that activity at that phase. Like, so, if you are starting 2 to 3 months out, like that means that you're starting to work on that stuff, like, probably 4 to 6 weeks at least before then, to have all the assets and all the, is that a fair, I'm just talking the ideal here. I know that the reality often doesn't.
In ideal world, I think yes, but I will say that 85% plus of, let's say, projects that we've worked on, it's really like cutting it very close, because of course, demo units or prototypes and assets are sort of the last step before people get into Kickstarter campaigns, and they already sort of, oh, now we need to launch because here's the demo unit or whatever. But for all the marketing, you need those prototypes and you need the assets. But a lot of times there is a huge overlap. So we're usually doing strategy with having just like some renders available while we wait for actual prototype like assets to be done. So there's already some small testing being done while we wait for that, and then like utilize that further. But yeah, ideally, probably 3 to 4 weeks, you get the assets done, prototypes, and then you use those assets to create strategy. But a lot of it as well, I think it's really hard, because I would want to say that ideally you would want to have the assets before you start marketing. But because in a lot of pre-launches, we see such big differences in between assets and how they perform. And that can really shape the direction as well. So it's really nice if the creator can be a bit fluid, even though I know that's really difficult when you're kind of building your business plan and project, but being open to being fluid and being like, okay, for example, like it's only men who are responding to this product. Like, and sometimes we get creators that have done photo shoots and videos and there's only women in images and videos. And it's like, well, this is not going to work. We need guys. And they can't do anything because they've already spent all their money on that photo shoot and that's it. So a lot of times it's maybe better to start with less complete assets and then have a slot like a month before the campaign so that you can use pre-launch insights to kind of create
to drive
assets that are really suited for how the market is responding to the product.
Got it. And one question I have for you also, like it's not uncommon, I know, for creators to start, I mean, either because they've started the community building work organically, so maybe they've started that like, 6 months, a year before, or because they were planning to launch and then the launch got pushed back because of their manufacturing, or like, what do you recommend? Do you have any recommendations for those types of creators? Like, how can they keep that list warmer for a longer period of time? If if they're going to have some, people on that list for 6 months, like, is there any or even for creators that come to you and maybe already have a list, like, is there a special strategy you guys use to engage those like existing lists?
Yeah, I think those are two really good questions. I think to your first point, if it's a longer period, I think you just need to be a lot more creative. One, either with really like slow dripping content, kind of starting with a teaser and then uncovering more and more and more about the product so that you keep people engaged, and then potentially getting involved, doing like Facebook Lives, doing demos of the product, like doing Q&A live webinars. You can do a lot if just you kind of think about it creatively to some extent, like maybe doing giveaways, like maybe doing, one-on-ones with the subscribers to kind of get them engaged.
Awesome.
But in terms of people who already have a list, I think it's a good point you make, because we actually see a lot of maybe second time or third time creators, or maybe even existing e-commerces that have ran like a Shopify store for 2 years. And then they come and they want to launch a new product on Kickstarter. And they think that everybody who they already have is going to buy this product. So they already have a list, but we see those lists performing really, really, really poorly. So if you look at benchmarks from like, we worked with campaigns like Sphero, for example, they had, hundreds of thousands of emails from before because they've been an existing business. And those emails would have converted much, much, much poorer than the emails that were generated in the last month before launch, because they were generated for that particular product. So people were subscribing because they want that. And I think we see that being the biggest challenge when we try to convince people, because they say, oh, but we have like 10,000 customers from our previous product. So, we don't really need the list. But when it goes live, it's too late, because then you see those people not converting for the new product, and you don't have a new list and you're live, you can kind of go back. Sometimes people actually do it. They cancel and then they realize, oh yeah, I'm going to go back on step and generate that list. So I think, existing lists, if they're for that particular product, it's just like being creative with how you engage them and get them excited, and, not get them bored, like getting them engaged. But if it's existing lists that are not exactly for this product, I think we usually suggest to test it first. So we would say, okay, let's have a landing page done and we'll just test your list and see how they opt into this new product.
Into this new product. Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense.
And usually then they see, oh, actually from those 10,000 people, we've seen like just recently 2,000 people, 2,000 subscribers from actual buyers of previous products. I think it was like 10 of them opted in for the new product launch. That's really, really small. So from that perspective, that puts things into like, okay, we do understand we need that, but sometimes people don't want to listen to
that. I can understand that. I'm just going to quickly checking in here on some of the comments. Michelle, I saw you left a question here. I would ask that if you could put that in the Q&A, we'll answer questions at the end. Alex, yes, I see your comment about interesting how the multi-million-dollar campaigns that weren't profitable. That is a thing. Yeah, Creighton, thanks for the comment around the learning about your campaign and whatnot through pre-marketing. That's something we're going to touch on a little bit later. So cool, let's continue. The next thing I want to talk about is really quickly, just like, when do you know that you're ready to scale the pre-launch marketing efforts from a creator? Like, are there specific metrics you guys are looking for? Like, what are the kind of things that help you, that provide the signal that you're like, okay, I think we're ready to push this further?
Yeah, it's a very good question, because sometimes scaling is because results are great in terms of like just, KPIs that we would look at in terms of, cost per subscriber or engagement rates, subscribe rates, all of that. So that's the obvious one, of course, it's good. Let's push more. Sometimes we would even tell clients, like they originally planned a smaller pre-launch, and you see that people are really, really taking up to the product. So you would kind of say, ooh, we really suggest you to actually push even more than you originally planned, because it does seem like people are really into it. Sometimes it's the need, sometimes it's you test and test and test, and there's mixed feedback, and there's 2 weeks to launch, and sometimes people have press embargoes or they can't push it back further. So it's just a need of scaling and pushing it further as much as it's possible, because that's really the only way to go. But yeah, of course, generally it's, the results and how they're performing. So if we see that there's good quality leads at a good price, of course, push more on it. I think it's, that's the main one.
And your answer there just leads us to the next thing I want to talk about, which is what you just said. If there's good quality leads and they're a good price, so let's talk about that. Like, because I think that gets to the question that I know, members of the launch studio community have struggled with sometimes. I know creators at large struggle with, is like, how do you assess the quality of a lead? Because I think that's something you were alluding to earlier, where it's not just about having people on an email list. Like, just, you can build a huge email list. I mean, you can find strategies to like grow an email list very big, but that doesn't mean that email list is going to be a good quality list that's going to deliver results for your product launch. So what are the type of strategies and ways that you think about that? So like, I think first, like, what are the ways that you guys try to measure that?
Yeah, I think there's different products and different ways to measure it. Of course, the obvious ones is, cost per lead is just the cost per lead, but then do people open those emails? So email open rate is the first one that you're looking at. So, okay, are people opening the email in a good percentage? And are they clicking to whatever you're asking them to do? So that's the second one. So we would call that like, kind of like, there's a cost per lead, but then there's a cost per the first action, and are they, and then the first action can be different to different people. So a lot of times if we have a big campaign that has enough time, the first action would be feedback to the survey. So we would see a benchmark there, about 40%, like 30 to 40% of people who are subscribing actually completing a quick survey in terms of why they're buying, what they think about the price, would they buy it now if it was available, and what are their favorite features, like a quick survey. If we see that there's about 30-40% of people who are subscribing actually engaging with the survey, that's a good sign. If we see lower than that, that's already sort of like alert, we need to be very cautious here. So if that's, for example, the call to action, some people, especially for more expensive products, they go straight to reserve.
Lina, let me stop for 1 second. I just want to ask, the 40 to 50 people, is that 40 to 50 people of
percent?
Yeah, 40 to 50% of the people who open the email, or just 40-50% overall?
All subscribers, because it would be like, once they subscribe, they get the survey on the thank you page, and they get the survey in the welcome email. So collectively from both of those, you kind of are looking for 40% to engage, 30 to 40, up to 50 sometimes even we see. But if it's below that, it's already a risk that, okay, people are subscribing, but they're not really into this. They're not happy to give feedback. So again, going back to this community element, they don't really want to partake in the process. They just subscribed and, so that's why surveys are a really good way to kind of check in, because as well, in this short survey, we normally ask 2 very important questions. So would you buy it if it would be available today? Because that kind of puts people in a position, oh, actually, yes, I would, because I need it. And 2, is the price that we're currently testing and the customer wants to go with, is that something that people consider high value, okay value, under average value? And I think this is probably what people get wrong, because they ask people, oh, how much would you be willing to pay for this product? And people are always going to go for the lowest price. And I think it's really about asking people, like, do you think that this product at this price, what kind of value for money is it? Is it average? Is it above average? And then we look at that percentage and see, okay, we know good campaigns where people converted from email lists have had a really high percentage of above average value for money. So if, again, we see that there's low value for money, we would give the creator feedback and say, you know, people are subscribing, but they find it too expensive. So of course it's up to them to change the price, but sometimes they don't. And then yes, people do not convert from emails if they've already expressed that this is too high of a price. So survey, for example, is a great one. There's reservations. A lot of people do reservations nowadays, but I feel it's really an important way that it's not for everybody. If you're selling something that's going to be $50, it's quite an ask to get people to pay a $1 reservation. So it's better to check in their quality with a survey, or with asking them to join like a VIP group or something like that, so you can see the percentage that sort of follows to the next action. Reservations, I think, are great for things that are pricier. So we like to do like $10 reservations or $5 reservations for products that are above $100 or products that are $200 plus, because that really shows the commitment, because people need to actually say, oh, I want this so much that I'm going to get my card out, or, you know, Apple Pay.
Totally.
and just, you know, put down that deposit until I wait for it, because I want to be the first like 100 to get it. And I think that that's a really good one. But again, I wouldn't stress about it if it's a board game, or if it's something that, you know, it's easier to buy and doesn't take as much of flexible income to buy. So yeah, I would say like surveys, joining VIP groups straight after subscribing, you know, seeing, is it, you know, you have 1,000 subscribers and 10 have joined a VIP group. Again, that's a sign for worry, because again, people are not really excited about this joint effort and whatnot. And then reservations, for example. And then of course there's other ones along the line, right? This is just the first action that you're kind of like testing the quality. But then it comes, for example, how you do a live demo, how many people are joining a live demo, you know, out of those 5,000 subscribers. If there's 5 live demo attendees, that's not good. You want
of course. And of course, I mean, one thing that I'm also reading from you, and I think it's something that I see some creators don't do, like I think you had these kind of 3 big things, which is like surveys, reservation lists, these kind of groups, these VIP groups. But another underlying thing is like always giving people a way to interact with your communications with them, so that you're always being able to measure engagement, not just with an open, but also with some other activity that you're offering them to take part in. Is that a fair thing to take from what you're saying?
Yeah, definitely. And I think just simple things, and you would be surprised how many people don't do it, but a simple thing to, after every email, to be and say at the end of the email, if you have any questions, reply to this email. You know, people can reply to marketing emails, you know, just by clicking reply like to any normal email and ask questions. And I think just putting that out there and saying at the end of any whatever newsletter you're sending, so that it says, you know, thanks for being on this journey. Like, if you have any questions whatsoever, just reply to this email and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. And keeping on top of those emails, because you would be surprised how much you learn from things that people will reply with in terms of questions or, you know, feedback and stuff like that. And it's just telling people that it's okay, because I think people generally think, oh, it's a newsletter, you know, this is not an email, but just saying it, you know, and signing it like Julio rather than Launch Studio, you know, just making it personal for people to think, oh, okay, like I can write back to Julio and ask him about this product.
So, you know, while I'd love to continue diving into this area, we you know, in about 10 minutes, we'll have to open it up to questions. So I want to push forward and talk about something that, you know, I think a lot of people don't think about, which is how running a pre-campaign effort. And this is the one thing I think Creighton had mentioned that he loved this idea, which is like how doing pre-campaigns can help inform and help you build a better project page, a project page that converts more, because you'll know more about what your customers' needs are. And can you talk a little bit about the different ways that your team uses pre-launch marketing to get these insights and to unearth these learnings?
Yeah, there's a lot of A/B testing. I mean, it's a lot of the A/B testing, of course, goes to improve performance during pre-launch, but you learn so much through it that is very useful, of course, for, let's say, specifically for the campaign page. So an example of that would be A/B testing on landing pages, right? A/B testing like a small Kickstarter page. You kind of have to introduce the product and introduce it in a way where people are intrigued and want to kind of get it for that sort of special launch deal. So A/B testing on landing page is really good because you can test price points, A/B test it. You can test different ways of storytelling. Do you first introduce the sustainability aspect, or is it first like features of the actual product, or do you first introduce the team, like what impacts conversion rates more or what doesn't impact conversion rates at all? So I think landing pages testing is really good. It's an example. It's hard to see, I think, because it's such a condensed landing page, but just for example, like doing a shorter page versus a longer page, do people require more information versus condensed information? Do people want to learn about the features first, or do they want to learn about the problems that it solves first? And you can take all those outtakes and take all those insights from that testing and implement it on the Kickstarter page, because you have to give the story and the product pitch in the same manner. So if you found something that works in pre-launch, then of course it is very likely, of course, that it's going to work on the Kickstarter page. And then as well with the ads, for example, the biggest elements of an ad normally is the main creative, like Facebook and Instagram ads in this case, is the main creative and the headlines. And that's the same on Kickstarter. So when people, if you do well and if you start trending or you're featured on a homepage or in a newsletter or, popular in the category, on Kickstarter, that's what it shows. It shows a picture of your product and it shows a tagline. So during pre-launch, you're testing a lot of ads, and all those ads are built in a very similar manner. They have the main image and then they have a tagline. So depending on testing all those different taglines, those are the insights to take and then use on Kickstarter. We see a lot of times like people test so many and then they put something completely irrelevant on the Kickstarter headline. And it's like, oh, but we know that this headline has overperformed any other headline. You should definitely use that, as your Kickstarter main headline. So here, like the slide you're showing, is just an example, how with ads, we're using still images, testing different kinds of videos, and then testing different headlines. Those are like H1, H2, H3 that you see, for example. And from those, you then kind of see, okay, there's always a winner. And for example, in those 3 examples that you're showing, surprisingly, it's the lime green version that has worked the best in terms of the headline and creative combo. And it's something that, the creator can take on board and be like, okay, I know for a fact that after showing this to 100,000 people on Facebook, this was the tagline and this was the image that performed best. So it is likely that using that headline and image will also perform best as main project image and main project headline on the actual campaign. So yeah, so you can learn those kind of things, very, very quickly.
And do you guys take a very structured approach to setting up? Like, is there just like how many different types of messages do you guys tend to test? Does it really vary, or is it always like you guys always try to test at least 4 different or 3 different messaging?
Well, sometimes it's as many as the client allows us, because a lot of people are very, very touchy-feely about headlines. And I think that's the biggest challenge we normally face, because they have this idea of, oh, these are our branded taglines, and they tell us stick to those, even if we think they're not going to work. So I think, again, being fluid with being open to trying different things is really good. But I think normally we would try as many as it takes to get something that we know is above average, if you know what I mean. So we have sample and we know benchmark. So if we see, for example, on Facebook, a benchmark for engagement rate is 1%. Once we find things that work at 2, 3, 4%, we know that's way above average. So we know that's a really good option to go on with. So of
Yeah.
course, we start testing with a lot of variations, of course, depending on the budget. So if somebody has, 5,000 pre-launch budget and somebody has 100,000 pre-launch budget, the 100,000 has so much more testing possibilities because you have to spend a certain amount of money per each test. But definitely, yeah, we test as far as until we find something that works really well.
Cool. So now let's shift gears, still in the same area, but talk about like developing landing pages that convert, like things like that. Like how do you generate the most leads when you're leading up to launch? So like kind of what are some best practices as far as creating a landing page goes?
Yeah, and I think the most important takeaway from this is that it is a landing page, not a website. And I think this is the most common misconception we get, that people want us to build a website. And that's probably a big reason as well sometimes that people are dissatisfied, because they think that we're going to build them this beautiful interactive website, that they can use for a branded website, whereas we build landing pages. And by definition, a landing page is somewhere people land from an ad in most cases, or from whatever efforts you're doing. So landing pages are made to support advertising and not to support branding. So as you can see here, again, it's probably a difficult one for people to see, but websites have about us page and contact us page and FAQs and all of those kind of things. Whereas landing page, the only thing that you do on the landing page is subscribe. There's no social media icons, there's no FAQs, there's no about us page, there's no sub pages. There's just, this is it. This is the only action on this page is subscribe. There's nothing else. Because otherwise conversion rates are not there. And we see that 20% conversion rate on a landing page versus a website here on this example, for example, that's a super nice, things are popping up left and right and they're interactive and beautiful. That would convert at maybe 5, max 10% if somebody's really, really lucky and has a good product. Whereas landing pages convert 15, 20% because they're made to be built for people to convert. And a lot of times they can be adjusted, they can run A/B tests, and that's important. Landing pages are fluid and they would be okay. We can build a landing page for somebody who's interested in meditation. That's a bit different to, somebody who's interested in running. If it's the same product that fits both, they're going to see a bit different imaging on the landing page as well. So landing page should be simple, should load fast, should be mobile friendly. Like 90% of people from social media will come from mobile. So, and people usually look at it on desktop when they work during the day. So a lot of times,
I mean, that was my mistake always. When I would always be judging landing pages, I would often be looking at the desktop as well.
Yeah, and we get that. So like we make a landing page for mobile, and then we send it for feedback. And then the client comes back with all this desktop feedback, all like this on desktop doesn't look nice, but it's like, nobody's going to see it on a desktop. Like you're going to see it, but everybody's on mobile, and that's where they need to convert. So can't have heavy GIFs, can't have heavy like videos. It has to like load instantly when somebody clicks a link. And it needs to say what it needs to say in order to convince people to subscribe. And it needs to support quick changes, meaning, today we learned this doesn't work. We try something else in the afternoon. We try something else next morning. So yeah, I think that's what people get wrong a lot of times. But I think the main takeaway is fast loading, mobile optimized, simple, as in the simpler, the better. Image text works best. It doesn't need to be crazy animations and swipe left, right. It just needs to be straightforward, to the point, pitch product, and trying a lot of different variations of those in order to figure out what people will resonate with.
No, that's great. And I would love to talk more, but I do want us to move on to the Q&A since we still have about a little bit over 20 minutes left. I know that as we move into the Q&A, I know that some people have been asking some questions in the chat. I'm going to ask you again, please put those questions into the Q&A, because that's where we're going to be taking the questions from. And please spend some time now and upvote questions, because we're going to start. I can see right now there's only one question that has been upvoted, and that's the question that we're going to start with, because we're gonna take our guide from like what questions are getting upvoted. So Lina, what I'll do is I'll read the question and then we can chat through it. So I see Anaruta, you have two questions, but I'm going to start with just one, and then we're going to jump to someone else and then come back, just because I think it's only fair that everybody gets one question at a time. So how to improve mail open rates? Most of the time in Gmail, your mail gets into the promotions tab, and people miss it. So do you guys have any strategies that you use for that?
Very good question. Very common problem. So there's definitely things that can be done. One thing is, and it goes back to what we just discussed on landing pages, it's collecting first names so that you can personalize emails. A lot of people, like you see, 70% of landing pages that are not made by agencies are made with just an email field. And that causes that every email is generic. So it will be spammed in most cases or be promotion, because like Gmail sees that the same exact email went to so many people. Whereas if you at least collect the first name, then you can have first name in the subject, you can have first name in the preview text, and you can have first name several places in the email. And that breaks the cycle of Gmail thinking this is the same email, because actually in 4 different places, it has a first name inserted. So it breaks this sort of dynamic of the same thing. So that's one thing, collect first names. That's one. Second is verifying and authenticating the email domain. That's a really common issue as well. So we see people set up a MailChimp account or whatever account, and then they start sending emails, but they don't go and authenticate their domain. And that's a specific setup. And people just, people like to skip to the end when they set up a MailChimp account or a similar account. So making sure that domain is not just verified, which most people do, but they don't authenticate it. And authentication needs a bit of technical skill, but it's easy with like help guides online. So you would have to go to GoDaddy or somewhere, set up a DNS, put a few records in, and then it's authenticated. So that helps as well to kind of increase deliverability in this case. And then thirdly, what you can do is as well, if things are still not improving, is send plain text emails instead of HTML nice design emails, but make emails look like just your regular email. So that would help as well in terms of the email getting through. And then I guess the last one that sort of also optional is well, not optional, but is making sure that you're not on any blocked lists. So a lot of people that we see that have maybe used the domain before, for a lot of times they would have already gone on a blocked list, or their domain would have some triggers that go into spam filters. So that's one. And then last but not least is just doing the groundwork yourself. Like we've seen, especially small campaigns, when there's 1,000 email subscribers from the list, if 700 didn't open the launch email, just go and start emailing them, like literally like from your own email, because
like a personal
get the job done sometimes. You do it with 20,000 emails, but if it's really, really intense, then you can do that. But yeah, those would be the top tips to kind of get.
No, those are great. And actually, I am going to go and ask the other question here, because that's a question that I had on my mind too that we didn't get to. Is they're asking, how effective is the $1 reservation? Or let's just make it more broad. How effective are reservations? And then the second part, which is how do you do reservations with using Kickstarter, since you don't have secret rewards? So how do you guys manage that?
I'll keep this one quick. So reservations generally are effective for quality testing. They're not something that's going to change things. So usually we would see that a reservation would convert between 30 to 50%, 50% for really popular, engaged community campaigns, and then 30% is good. But if you see less than that, then something went off, something wasn't communicated well. So reservation is to be communicated properly. What are people getting? Why are they reserving? Rather than just like, oh, here's a $1 and then no explanation. So that's one, how it was explained. But yeah, generally we see 30 to 50% converting. So if you get 1,000 reservations, you can think 300 to 500 will actually buy. In terms of what to offer them, generally, of course, Kickstarter doesn't have secret perks, but there's always things that you can offer. So for example, you can offer free shipping if you're not charging shipping on Kickstarter, and if you're charging it later in a pledge manager. You can offer extras. So for example, add-ons that are to be paid for can be offered in advance. Some people offer priority shipping. Some people offer like extra different like founder group, like one-on-ones with founders, like, or they make like we're gonna have a a quarterly founder session for all the early reservers where you have to know like what's going on with the team, yada, yada, yada. So there's creative ways to kind of come up with things that are still beneficial. But I think stressing that the reservation gets them early access, gets them behind the scenes access. You know, people are excited about that when it's Kickstarter launches. It doesn't have to be, you know, $10 discount. There can be more meaningful things that actually don't cost anything, like founder's name on the website, you know, once the actual website launches, you know, things like that can be offered and people will be excited about it anyway. And just, yeah, communicating that this is an exclusive sort of group then, and they need to be communicated exclusively. I think as well, a common mistake, people take reservations, but then they send everybody the same emails. You should then segment those out and make sure that they get addressed it properly and that they're always, you know, thanked for being this early supporters and early reservers, because they are special, because they kind of gave you their trust much earlier than anybody else.
Yeah, great. So then moving on to the next most voted one, how effective is getting social media influencers to promote your product? You know, and pre-launch, is that something that you guys do? Is that something that's worked?
This is a great one because not effective. I mean, probably if there's influencers that are Kickstarter related, I know maybe there's a few that really just do Kickstarter products, but we've had campaigns that had like social media influencers that had 100,000 followers and they posted and they got 5 backers from that, you know. So sometimes we see people expect PR and influencers specifically. You know, when we talk, like we talked earlier, okay, $1 million campaign, 300,000 comes from Kickstarter. Where does the other 700,000 come from? And a lot of people think, oh, but we'll have crazy PR and we'll have influencers. And it's like, no, that will bring like 10, 20 backers max. Like in some cases, but those were really rare where we've seen PR and influencers together bring 5%. And I like to tell this story about a project that we ran that whose investor is Pharrell, and they got on and the NBC show, you know, and people then understand that, okay, then PR really isn't worthwhile as much, at least, because they got on an NBC primetime show and they were featured on the show. And there was no increase in backers whatsoever on that day. There was no increase in searches because the general public is not interested as much in, you know, Kickstarter products, and they don't understand what it is in most cases. So if people go for social influencers and PR, they have value, and the value of those is just trust. And I know that's intangible. So I think it's really difficult because those things usually cost a lot, but they're not performance drivers. They're drivers of trust so that other channels can perform better because people see, oh, okay, they had this influencer engaged. So clearly this product is legit and it's going to happen very likely. And people have used it and, you know, experienced it. And the same with press. You know, people trusted that if it was featured somewhere, then it's probably legit. And usually the process is they see the Kickstarter page, they go Google it, they see a press article, and that convinces them to go back and buy. But it's usually not reverse. It's not, oh, I read a PR article and now I'm coming and buying. So I think it's just, making sure that you put the right, that you don't waste all your money on it. If it costs too much, it's probably not worth it. But if you can get it through, you know, groundwork and networking and connections, then of course it's adding value, but it's adding value to the trust of the campaign, not driving tons of backers.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add to that is, like, you know, the only places that I've seen it really work was on very niche products where they got it's like a creative tool around, you know, I mean, a recent example is there's a campaign called Emotibit that is this, you know, biometric sensor. And they had a guy who was an influencer in just that maker community do a video about that, how to use that product. But it was like very much like a very niche product that is a creative tool. And it was somebody in that community who's a respected creator who was showing how to use this tool and how excited they were about it. Like it was not this mass kind of thing. It was like a super targeted. And I think that's a super hard to make that happen. But that's the only way that I've seen in the last few years where something like that has worked. So
I think with creator community as well, like, because there's more people in their community likely to understand Kickstarter as well. Because we had that, you know, there was a product that was specifically for surfers and they had, like, I think like a world champ surfer like post about it and feature them. But that's the one that I said brought 6 backers out of 100,000 followers. And even though it was quite specific, so I think there needs to be an extra overlap, so it's niche, but also somewhat in a Kickstarter community-ish kind of niche. So
it needs, there's a lot of Venn diagrams that need to come together for it to work. Okay, great. Let's go on to the next one. Alex is asking, how do you show or test pricing?
It's a very good one. So in pre-launch, generally like that can be done either on the ads themselves, so that the ads have a very prominent price put on it. So you then see if engagement rates actually are lower or higher on different price points. Then you can do it if you don't feel comfortable on ads, because that's a bit intense. We do it on landing pages. So we would have a landing page A that has a certain price point, landing page B that has a different price point, and they're randomized. So whenever a person gets to a landing page, they get shown a random version of the page, and then we statistically compare the conversion rate. So if there is a big difference between the 2 price points, then of course there is a big price sensitivity. Sometimes there are no big differences, meaning that there's not as much price sensitivity out there, and then you can test a few extra price points, depending on what the data says. So that's 2. And then 3, the best one for me always is the survey, because if you have the survey, people feel comfortable to express themselves. And a lot of times people will subscribe even though they see a high price, and then in the survey they'll say that the value is average or below average, and then they'll have an open-ended question, and you'll see like 10% of the open-ended questions mentioning price too high. So those are like 3 ways that we like to test price. And then of course, if you had time to do focus interviews, even better. But those 3 things are very easy and straightforward, while doing all the other things that are bringing subscribers and building community, but also testing the price while doing that.
Awesome. Okay, so next up we have Jessica's question, which is, so should we have a different landing page for each consumer profile, for each like audience group that they're going after for their product?
It depends on the product. So if product use cases are completely different, then like in general, the way we would approach it, just in terms of resource wise, you start with a general landing page for everybody, probably a general A/B test, and then you see how different audiences respond to it. If you see that some audiences who you think are actually really relevant audiences for this product are not responding well, and they have low conversion rates and high cost per lead, then that would be a sign to actually go and invest extra resources to create a custom landing page for them only, and then test that separately. So it depends on a case-by-case basis, but you would normally start with a general product pitch landing pages, see how different audiences respond to them, and then go from there. But of course, like if there's, a different use case for a product that can be used for meditation, but also for sports, of course, those 2 audiences will want completely different things. And so then that would make sense. But if it's, a developer versus, a software developer versus a hardware person, it can be a very similar landing page in most cases. And I think a lot of products generally are can be done with one landing page. But yes, I mean, the plus of landing pages is that you can customize them for different audiences, which is definitely can improve results.
Awesome. So moving to the top one now, I see some of them are getting more votes. Creighton's question is, let's say you had just a week to do pre-launch. Totally hypothetical here. What would you do?
Well, everything, but in a week. So of course, much less emails and engagements and stuff, but I would probably sit down for one, if it was me personally, I would sit down for one day and I would get everything ready. So I would get the landing pages done. I would have the email newsletters done, have a strategy ready. Okay, what am I communicating in this week? So in most cases, because just a week, I would be just saying this is launching next week, and give them one quality question, either a survey, a VIP group, a reservation, depending on what the product is. So have that one quality check ready and get everything done in one day, and then just put it live, and on a daily basis adjust based on what's going on and try to get things done. I think recently there it's also like depending on your budgets, because actually some things are not doable nowadays with Facebook. So Facebook, if you try to use Facebook for driving traffic, keep an eye that new accounts get disabled very quickly, and you won't be able to get them enabled within a week. So you might start something and you'll get disabled just through random Facebook flag suspicious activity, and they won't re-enable your account, so you'll be kind of stuck. And another pitfall can be that most Facebook new accounts can get a spending limit added on the account, so you can't actually spend more than $50 in some cases, 100, some cases $200, but you actually can't spend more than that. So again, you won't be able to do much. But yeah, I would still do everything in that week and probably have a demo scheduled for the day before launch as well, so that I could get everybody who subscribed really excited in the day before and be like, here's the product, this is what's happening, why it's important that you're there tomorrow, like be very personable. But I think it's technically doable, but it would be a full-time job that week. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say, I think you have to make sure that your calendar is clear for that week, so that you're just focused on that. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I before going to the next question, I mean, this situation with Facebook, I have been hearing a lot from creators, even seen some of our members suffer through this, is how Facebook has become, or their algorithm has become much more conservative in terms of like blocking accounts recently.
Yeah, extremely.
And so
extremely sensitive, and it's really hard for us specifically, because we're a Facebook preferred agency, and we have people we work with from Facebook, and also they can't help because those are automated flags, and it's just something that they can escalate for us. But yeah, for us it's challenging because I think a lot of our clients think, oh, they're connected, so they're going to sort it out. But because we work with clients with their own account so that they can keep the accounts in the future, we don't have ownership of it, so we don't know what exactly could have gone wrong, because sometimes it's payment methods that Facebook just deems suspicious. Sometimes it's a login browser or something that Facebook deems suspicious, and it just blocks everything, and then there's weeks of back and forth to get that re-enabled. So it is a pain. Yeah, they've become very sensitive.
So I think that is something that people need to keep in mind, from a timing perspective as well. If you have a really crunched time, that this could become an issue for you. If you have a little bit more of a time, it will be annoying, but you can get around it. But I want to just let's do two quick final questions here. I'm sorry to everyone that we won't get through all the questions, but Femi, I see your questions here at the top. Do you have any experience launching campaigns in 2 languages? And what do you recommend on the video pitch? English voice with English subtitle, or English voice with French subtitle, or so what do you recommend for campaigns that are
this national? Is a very, very good question. I think it's probably too long of a discussion, but I've only had this question ever asked from French creators. I must say French and maybe a few German, but mostly just French. And I know they have local communities, and the English is not super like adopted language. So I wouldn't say I have tremendous amount of experience with that one. I know people have, a copy of the page in French down below, and I would definitely prioritize the English version anyway, because Kickstarter is a platform that's mostly English, and the same with the video. I think the video being in English is better, and having French subtitles on top of that probably would work. Although I think some people might get confused, because again, like 60% probably of visitors of Kickstarter pages are on mobile devices. So that by default usually means they're on mute. So I think if there's American visitors coming on there and they're on mute and they're seeing French subtitles, they just will get confused as well. So I think it is a challenging one, and I wouldn't say that I would be an expert to discuss that one. I've mostly ran English only campaigns. I'm sorry that I don't have more.
Yeah, no, that is a tough one. And I think Kickstarter doesn't have great tool. I mean, the good thing that Kickstarter does have now is if your French backers can experience and go through the pledging process in French, like they can actually, which is great. That wasn't the case like 4 or 5 years ago. But in terms of like helping you tell your story in 2 languages, Kickstarter doesn't have a great, no platforms have a great set of tools around that right now. And you've seen also creators sometimes do on the page itself, like at the top in one language and at the bottom another language. I do fully agree with Lina that you should prioritize English though, because if the bulk of your audience really is just based in France, you might want to just do a local platform. You know, if you expect most of your audience to be coming from abroad, but you think you're going to have a big contingent from France, then doing a Kickstarter and playing around with one of these bilingual, like kind of like 2-language modes, or just, you know, doing 2-language versions on the page or something, makes sense. And as much as there isn't a perfect approach, like I think the French subtitles on an English would be the best. And you could even at the beginning, you know, somehow say like these are French subtitles for an English video or something to. But let's do one final question. I think Rob's question here, which I think is a pretty good question, that was something we didn't actually touch on. What's a good budget for pre-launch activities?
Yeah, we can do 3 very quick ones.
Okay, let's do 3 very quick.
Budget depends on the goal. I think definitely calculating, you know, the cost per lead that you're getting and what you're likely to get from it, and then go from there. So there's no right or wrong budget. It's really what your goal is, and then estimating from that goal what you need to bring to the table in pre-launch. I would say generally I suggest that it's that you try and get 10% of what your final goal is. So if, let's say, go back to 1 million, if it's 1 million, you're trying to get at least 100,000 from your pre-launch subscribers. So in order to get that depends then how your average product price is, but it would be a bigger budget, of course, than if you have 50,000, you're trying to get at least 5,000 from the pre-launch community. So calculating it based on the KPIs, which are cost per lead and conversion rates of the email list, and figuring that one out from there.
Great. Okay, cool. So then let's go on to the next one. Michelle's question: which are the differences between Kickstarter and Indiegogo or any other platforms to launch products?
Yeah, I mean, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, I would say similar to some extent in terms of how you would go about it, but of course very different in terms of community. I think Indiegogo's maybe much more for like gadgets that exist but have better, like different features, more features, cheaper version of something that exists, whereas I think Kickstarter responds really well to like new products and something that's very new and different and exciting, sustainable maybe, board games, stuff like that you can't really get on Indiegogo. So I think it's really about the product if we do it really quickly. And then other launch platforms, I think they're much smaller, so you wouldn't expect to get a lot of this percentage, like the 30% we've been talking about, which is just an estimate and an average from it. And then of course, if you launch on your own website like a Shopify, then you don't get any extra bits from the platform. You're just kind of bringing your own revenues through whatever efforts you're doing.
Awesome. Okay, last one. Roger, I think, is just asking in response, I think, to that first set, one of our first parts of our conversation. So if your product costs $20, you shouldn't look for leads through pre-launch. So he just
it's very good, actually, that one to finish off with, because I think that sums up pre-launch really well. The answer is no, you should still do it, but you should do it consciously, that you're probably investing this and you're not getting this money back directly, so you're probably making a loss on it, but a conscious loss, so that you have to plan it and understand, okay, I still need community, I still need things to happen, and if there's no organic way to do it, you would still need to invest into building it, but you consciously are aware that this is not gonna break even for you, but it's gonna get things started so that potentially other live activities can then help break even. That's really all I would say, because I think that's the most difficult one. Is you still need a pre-launch community, but yeah, it won't be one that brings multiple times returns. Definitely not.
Awesome. This is great. Well, with that, it's time for us to wrap up. So just a few quick things to wrap up. The first one, I wanted to share that on July 13th, we're going to have our next event. It's a creator and launch studio event. We're going to invite the team from Studio Neat to join us. They are a team, they run an independent design studio in Austin, have launched over 10 projects on Kickstarter, really amazing things. And they're going to be joining me for an hour and a half conversation as well about how they built their business and how they tap into crowdfunding to launch their products. Then I also wanted to just quickly make a plug for our past events. Please, go check out our past events at go.launchstudio.com on YouTube. That's where you can see all of our previous webinars, and also send me feedback. Anything that you liked about this event, you didn't like, topics you want us to cover, people you want us to talk to, please send me your feedback. I'm really, really looking forward to hearing anything that you'd like to hear about. And then finally, I wanted to give a big thank you to Lina for joining us today. It's been amazing to have you here with us. If you want to learn more about Nook, go to nook-digital.com. You can learn a lot about their services. They, again, have a lot of experience working with creators launching products on Kickstarter and elsewhere. So it's a team that I've heard a lot of really positive feedback from creators in my network that have worked with them. And then finally, I just wanted to, thank everyone else who has joined us today. Really appreciate your presence, your participation, your questions, your input. And if you do have any questions about Launch Studio, I'm going to hang out here and I'm happy to answer those. But to everyone else, just have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.
All right, awesome. So everyone can just drop off. If anyone has questions, just around Launch Studio, I would say now let's just drop those in the chat, just since I think the Q&A is full with questions around the content that we were covering with Lina. Awesome. I'm glad it seems like a lot of people seem to get a lot out of the event. That makes me quite happy. That is why we do these. Yes, Johan, I see you have your question. There is a discount for working with Nook for members of the Launch Studio community. If you wanna go to our member services area, you'll find the details there of that discount. How is Launch Studio growing? Launch Studio camp someday, perhaps, Creighton. Someday, that would be a lot of fun. But we are not there yet. Awesome. Thank you, Ivan, for joining. Thank you, Johanna. So Billy, I see your question about, out of those, 2,500 campaigns I backed, probably about, I don't know, 800, 700 of those I actually backed for a reward. The other ones I just backed to show support. And the vast majority of them have delivered. To be honest, I don't know. I don't have a percentage to give you. The vast majority of them have delivered, at least the ones that I cared about. But I've definitely backed, campaigns that haven't. Like I think that if I think of like the most prominent ones that come to mind, I backed the CST watch, which was supposed to be the thinnest watch ever. Early Kickstarter campaign, didn't deliver. I mean, those guys tried really hard, didn't deliver. What other ones did I back? And I backed this, this round cool speaker from, forgot the name of the company. I think it was like Hidden Audio or something. Those are the only two that come to mind where I backed something of some value, let's say over $100 that didn't deliver. I'm probably missing one or two other ones. I mean, tons of them had long delays. So that is very, very true. But grocery shopping on Kickstarter, yes, maybe someday. But I think you'd get very hungry if you were to do that. So Rob, about the budget question, did Lina say you should try to get 10% of backers from your pre-launch? Yes, you did say that. I mean, I think that's kind of your goal. But Rob, I think it's important to consider that like most campaigns only, the campaigns that do the best pre-launch work ever, where I've seen the biggest impact ever from pre-launch, probably about 40% of their backers came from pre-launch. And that's like way out of the ordinary, super, super high. Like most campaigns that do really well with pre-launch, it is like maybe 20% of their backers come from pre-launch. So, I think the notion is that 10% of your backers, and again, we're talking not just about your goal that's on your Kickstarter page, we're talking about your aspirational goal, because you have your goal that's like your minimum goal that you need to reach, which is the goal on your Kickstarter page, and then you have your aspirational goal, which is the goal that you ideally want to reach. And you should be doing all your marketing thinking about your aspirational goal, not your minimum goal. So for most projects, the reality is 10% of their aspirational goal tends to be pretty close to their, like often is close to their kind of base goal. So like, a lot of projects that are trying to raise, let's say $50,000, they actually are dreaming of raising 250. And so this would be 10% of that 250, not, and I think that just also, so I think that gives you a solid place to start. Like you can be more ambitious than that. Like you can say, like, I want a budget so that I can try to get 20% of my of like, I want to create a budget to aim for 20% of my backers to come from my pre-launch effort. That's fine. I think her approach to answering this question is like, what is the minimum that you need to set aside? And I think this is a good minimum. It's not to say that you like, and it also depends on your campaign. If you're selling a very expensive product, you might need to do more nurturing to get people to convert. So you might actually want to shoot for something higher because of that, because both you nurture people and also you get, your early backers, as we were talking about earlier, are more valuable than your later backers, because those early backers are essentially, they kind of are social proof for people who come to your page afterwards. So that's just like, again, some additional thoughts to your question. So Femi, I see your question here. Is it still a good time to launch even in August, September? Yeah, I would, my answer to this question, the best time to launch is always when you're ready to launch. So like, yes, seasonality, as far as seasonality goes, like August and September are not an especially bad time for you to launch. Like the only time that I think it's usually not ideal is like mid-December, like December through January, it can be tough because there's less activity. But even so, like you see a lot of creators really succeeding. Like I always say, like, if that's the time where you're gonna have all of your ducks in a row, you're gonna be able to do all your pre-work, you're really gonna be ready, and you're gonna have your community teed up and excited, then you should launch at that time frame. All right, but Billy, interesting, awesome. I definitely am a Kickstarter veteran. Marcy, would love to get help with our campaign. What's the best way to reach you? Just, my email is Julio at Launch Studio. So I'm just kind of typing it in here. So yeah, you can reach me there. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Julio Terra, just search for Julio Terra Launch Studio and you'll be able to find me there. What is your most expensive back? Oh, Ivan, let's see. What's my most expensive back? I think the most expensive thing I backed might be Oscar Lermite's Project the Moon, which he's one of the instructors for Launch Studio. Beautiful product. I also recently backed for one of our Launch Studio members, Marianne Van Albel, who's a solar designer, designed this beautiful light that was probably around $800. Those are probably the two most expensive things I've backed on Kickstarter. I don't usually back things that are that expensive only because you have to really want them. And so those, like, whereas when it's these expensive projects, I can just back on impulse. When it comes to projects of that scale, like it's really more, not only is it, I have to think long and hard of it, but a lot of those projects are things that live at my home. So I need to negotiate with my wife as well about whether or not we can invest in those items. So I see now, Anuruddha, is it better to show offer price on landing page? That is a very good question. I think it depends. I suggest, like I think it's one of those things, like if you show the price, you are going to get more qualified leads. You're probably going to get less leads, but you are going to get more qualified leads. I think, as Lina was saying, what you might want to do is, if you are doing like pre-launch for, like, let's say, 8 to 12 weeks, at first, you might not want to show that price and use the survey in order to, just get some data on the price that you're going to be offering, to see, like, get some insight from your community on that. And then as you're getting closer to launch, you can show that price. Like that would be my my thinking on that. But it's definitely one of those things, like, I think the more insecure you are about the price, the more important it is that you start getting it in front of your potential customers and getting a reaction on that price, because you don't want that to become the issue that keeps you from like being funded, because you just had a price that you could have somehow tried to get some input on, but you didn't, and then that becomes the ultimate thing that keeps you from succeeding. I mean, it's good to know that earlier so that you can reassess your product, your strategy beforehand. So Rob, I see, yeah, you're still waiting. Park and Diamond for that was a really cool helmet. I think that was an Indiegogo project though, which is but yeah, I almost backed for that one too. It's a very nice helmet. But that's, I think that's the reality, with Kickstarter and Indiegogo funded projects. Like there's a lot of projects just will take longer to manufacture than the creators expect. And I think a lot of you that are creators and that will soon launch a project, you will probably find that same to be true in your own experience. And I'm sorry to tell you. Okay, cool. Let's see more questions here. Wait, where I lost my place. Sorry, guys. There we go. Okay. Oh yeah. The last comment I see here from Alex. What are your thoughts on Lina saying don't expect much of a profit on KS? That goes counter to say Peak Design, where it's profitable channel for them. I mean, I think though, it's not saying that it's not a profitable channel. I think it's thinking about, most companies, when you make a product, the investment in making that product gets, paid off over a long period of time. It gets paid off over, sometimes a year or more, or 2 years. So I think it's more the thing, like if you're expecting for your crowdfunding campaign to pay off all those costs, right away, and to make profit on top of that, that's going to be really challenging. I mean, Peak Design, yes, that team is able to do it sometimes, but they're able to run campaigns with a huge scale. So, and I think also, I think it's important to think about it like a profitability, like if you model it out, like if you're thinking like, if you model it out, like, okay, I'm going to pay for the, all my tooling and whatnot, it's going to cost X. And your model says, I'm going to make back that money over a year. And so you price your product based on that model, then you might find that you can be profitable. But if you're thinking about like, oh, I need to make back that money for that tooling all in my Kickstarter, you're probably not going to be able to make any profit, because then you're actually, but then you're paying off this tooling in a cost you're not going to have to consider into the future. You're not amortizing that cost over a long period of time. So it's not to say that no Kickstarter projects are profitable. Like the simpler your project is, the more likely you are to have a really big margin, the least expensive it's going to be to produce it, and the more likely you are to be able to do something that's profitable. It's more just like most products don't become profitable right away because you're offsetting all those upfront costs. I think that's really, the core message there was like, most Kickstarter campaigns won't reach profitability in this short term, in this like 1 month window of funding. That's like, hopefully that will offset a lot of your costs. But for you to become profitable, you're going to have to offset a shit ton of costs with manufacturing, tooling, minimum order quantities, and all that stuff. And even like, I think what we like on our course, the perspective that Oscar gives in that lesson around manufacturing stuff is how, like, the way he makes a profits in his projects is he doesn't make a profit on Kickstarter, but he actually makes he is able to build inventory with Kickstarter, and then he's able to make some profit when he sells some of that inventory down the road. So I think that the big thing here is that, like, you, especially outside of Kickstarter, you do have a lot of conversations sometimes like, oh, this person raised $1 million, so they have shitloads of money, like they're but the reality is, when you consider all the marketing spend, all those manufacturing costs, like, chances are, we're not saying they're losing money, like, and they might even be making a little bit of money, but they're not, like, nobody's making out like a bandit, when they successfully fund on Kickstarter. It's very like, I'm sure you can find some examples where a creator did make a lot of money doing that, and probably, when it comes to soft goods, like, things that are less complex, easier to happen. But for something like a bike or a hardware, electronics or something, like, that I would think it's very hard for you to find somebody who really made a lot of money from a Kickstarter campaign. That's very different than saying their Kickstarter campaign might have been an amazing springboard to get them to profitability. You know, I hope that helps, Alex. I don't know if that helps. And I know your position as a solopreneur is a, you know, is a tough, is a specific challenge. But I think we can talk more about your situation in our Slack or in our office hours later this week. Okay, awesome. Marcia, thank you for coming. And Ruda, I see you're asking about BackerKit pledge management tool. Is it worth it? Any alternatives? I mean, I think pledge management tools are really valuable. And BackerKit has a good pledge management tool that I think for a lot of creators is worth it. I mean, it's like, you know, don't think about it only as a cost. There is a cost and you have to think about it, but think about it, how much value it's going to add in terms of the time you're going to save, in terms of how it's going to help you, you know, collect fulfillment data in an easier way. It's going to help you package that data more easily to provide it to your fulfillment providers or to use it yourself to manage that fulfillment. So I do think pledge management for campaigns that, one, have a large backer community or have a complex set of different reward tiers or different product variants, then pledge management tools really do become worth it. And BackerKit has the most well-known, most tried and true tool in the space. The other tools that you see in the space are Kickbooster just launched a pledge manager, but you also have a company called Pledge Manager that I don't know, I haven't seen them being used very much lately, but they're another one. And there's Pledgebox is one. CrowdOx, which was the other option, actually BackerKit bought them out recently, so their offerings have been merged. But I do think that if you have a campaign of a significant scale, like one of those tools, it can be really, really valuable. Okay, cool. Any final questions before we wrap up? I think that's pretty much it for today. So again, thank you all for joining today. It's been my pleasure to have you all here. I hope you learned a lot. And as I said, please email me with feedback. That is the only thing I ask. Okay. Bye, everyone.